So I'm a project manager on the Galileo project. This is just something I'm setting up for a site survey. So this is an enclosure that's going to hold a FLIR infrared camera. You might hear like in the Galileo project's papers or just in any observations in a single camera, the discussion of angular kinematics. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying about, if you have an object moving across your frame.
All right, let's go with number one then. Why have the Galileo Project findings not been publicized or gained traction for Gen Pop Viz? Gen Pop Viz?
Good question, and probably the most common question I get. And I understand the frustration with wondering, what is the Galileo project up to? What have they found?
Why don't you ask Mr. Bledsoe? So this will be Chris Bledsoe. Would he be so kind as to sit next to the sensors? The following is a conversation with Ezra Kelderman. Ezra is a systems engineer and the current project manager at Harvard University's Galileo Project. Yes, that Galileo Project, the one headed by Professor Avi Loeb. I spoke to Ezra last year on the podcast about his role in the Galileo Project in Season 1, Episode 20, where Ezra spoke with me at length about his work on UAP, his first sighting of something unexplainable in the sky when he was younger, and about all things UAP, UFO related. We kept in touch and chatted behind the scenes. And since our last conversation, I've had hundreds and hundreds of DMs from people asking me what kind of technology is out there to capture better UFO, UAP imagery and data. What is affordable, and for some, what's the best out there, and money is no limit, and everything in between. And I've always been honest. I know what I look for when people send me footage, but I'm no expert when it comes to capture of that imagery and data. But I know a man who is. Ezra was kind enough to put together some slides and a sort of presentation, if you will, into an introduction to citizen UAP analysis, something people have been asking for, and I think something that is hugely needed in this subject. After all, we've been asking for governments for transparency for decades. Perhaps it's time to take matters into our own hands and go out there as citizens and find that evidence ourselves and move away from blurry cell phone footage and start collecting some solid data. Ezra has been an absolute legend working on this, putting it together and sitting down with me for the following hour. He's an awesome guy and a wonderful person to have connected with last year. So with that said, and without further ado, the following is a conversation with Ezra Kelderman. Ezra, thanks again, man. I really appreciate you joining me. I think the last time we spoke was last year. Obviously, we've been talking sort of behind the scenes, but last year on the podcast. So welcome back, and thank you very much for joining me. Um, I think it's probably useful for people to know. I spoke to you a little while back and asked you for some advice on the best kind of UFO, UAP footage and data collection. What would be the best way that we could collect it as just citizen journalists, just people out in our garden and stuff? And you were very kind to put together a bit of a presentation, essentially. And I've had a bit of a look through beforehand. But if it's okay, would you be able to just give a quick summary of what you do and what the Galileo Project does, just to give people a bit of a catch up?
For sure, yeah. So I'm a project manager on the Galileo project. Started, I think a month after the project started up back in 2021. Started volunteering, and then worked full time for the project starting in 2022, and I've been full time ever since. So a lot of my duties are just kind of managing the day to day, wearing different hats, and probably more of my job the last couple years is has been around site deployments, interfacing with different site owners, and doing those deployments, tear downs, and that kind of thing. So um, yeah, a lot of my focus is just getting our footprint wider, even into fundraising activities and all the things that go into trying to capture UAP.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, if it's all right, then let's jump into some of these slides, and perhaps you can give us a bit of a talk through your thought process and how they would sort of translate to the everyday person and how we could incorporate them into our attempts at trying to capture better data, better imagery.
For sure. Yeah. And it's one of those things that, when you had asked me about that, you reached out to me and asked me about, citizen science and cameras that anybody can use. It's so hard to give a short answer because and I have a habit of doing this as an engineer where all my answers are, it depends. Um, so yeah, I tried to pull together uh, here at least all of the things you should consider when going into trying to do this yourself because you know every step of the way you're going to run into a lot of the hurdles we run into at like a bigger scale and using high dollar sensors and equipment. It's you're going to run into the same issues. Um, so yeah, I'll try to kind of focus it down into some of those main themes, and hopefully people can take something away from it that helps them get set up and not get super frustrated and maybe consider some things before they spend their money. So
Awesome.
yeah, jumping right into it. So some of the main themes you want to focus on, and what we focus on in the Galileo project, having a calibrated sensor. Um, so where is your sensor located? Where is it pointing? What's all in that frame that you're capturing? We've even run into this on the project where a camera wasn't aligned exactly where we thought it was, and so and you see this with videos people share on Reddit or wherever it might be, where other people want to get involved and help solve whatever this issue is, and no one knows where the camera's at, what direction it's pointing, things like that. So um, that will fill in a lot of gaps post-process if you know all of that information. Um, Detection, once you have an object, let's say that comes across your field of view, signal to noise is super important. You got to have as much signal as possible, and that could be a gain correction in your camera. It could be some way to like shield yourself from environmental light pollution, things like that. There's nothing more frustrated than reviewing a video and you have something on there, and due to just noise from whatever source it is, you're just stuck with that sort of gap in information. We've had that a lot of times with geese of all things. Flocks of geese go over, they look really interesting, and then yeah, you just you wish you had that clear high fidelity settings just balanced just right. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Targeting. So once you have an object on screen or in your field of view, what's your goal? Are you planning to um, lock onto it and track it somehow? That gets really complicated if you want to get into that. But um, yeah, if you have a narrow, high fidelity field of view, you're sacrificing real estate in your frame. So you might just get something that zips across your field of view, and that's your limit to what you can study and glean from that information if you have a single camera setup. So um, yeah, targeting gets, it's sort of like a second stage if you get um, the others solved. But and even more complicated is when you get into characterization. You know, what can you tell from this object on screen? How fast is it going? How large is it? Is it accelerating, decelerating? What direction is it going? That is probably the most common thing I see on social media when um, someone reports an object. And of course, in the video, you're going to have like a light in the sky and there's nothing to tell from it. It's already compressed from being uploaded. What the eye sees is going to be different from what the camera picks up. And, all this. And, um, but you'll see in a lot of those cases, oh, it was the size of a school bus, or it looked like it was going like 2,000 miles an hour. The most unfortunate thing is with a single camera setup, And that one object in the sky, you literally cannot claim any of those things, especially when you're dealing with something anomalous that you don't have a frame of reference for. If you and I went out and we saw Boeing 737, like we have in our memory banks what that looks like, what the size of it is, and so your mind can pretty quickly gauge the distance to that, right? Um, Unfortunately, in this subject, we don't really have a database for that frame of reference, so you're kind of stuck with anywhere between it's a bug 2 feet from my camera and hundreds of miles away. And that's just an unfortunate reality until you're able to get multiple perspectives set up or triangulation set up. So yeah, characterization gets really difficult until you're able to really add to your observatory, let's say.
Right.
When we start looking at the different modalities, one could get interested in, obviously optics. That's the go-to. What we do on the Galileo project, a lot of our focus is on infrared. Um, Obviously, visible light spectrum is going to be kind of the most informative immediately. And then how you set those up, whether they're fixed or pan tilt zoom, a mix of both is obviously good, but I think for most people setting up at home, I would recommend, start with a fixed visible camera setup. Wider field of view, something like a GoPro, and I'll show a little bit of, something I'm working on that might kind of help, inspire how folks do that. But yeah, something as simple as a GoPro give you a decent field of view. Um, you could set up multiple for all sky coverage, but really keep in mind that coverage versus fidelity balance that you're going to have to play. Uh, I don't think there's anything wrong in having a really high fidelity, narrow field of view optic setup, um, because you could cover the entire sky, have a whole array set up, and with no fidelity, you could see an object go all the way through, and you just really don't know what to do with that. So you got to play that balance and see what your budget allows for, see what you can really get away with. Something we don't talk about a whole lot, but is an important part of what we're doing is acoustic measurements. So one thing you might add to, anyone could add to their setup is a simple microphone. What is that good for? What are you listening to? We really don't know. But let's say you have an object fly over and it sounds like an airplane. Well, okay, that helps you designate, what is this that flew over. But equally valuable is perhaps you have an object fly over some sort of light and there's no sound. Um, that that's another data point, right?
Yeah.
Where there's expected sound and you don't get any, then that can raise more questions. Other things we try to add and are in the process of configuring, calibrating, setting up, adding ADSB transponders. So most aircraft transpond. Um, it's a legal requirement. A lot of military aircraft won't necessarily transpond, and this is all information you can get on something like Flight Radar 24. You've probably seen in a lot of cases on Reddit or wherever where somebody jumps in and verifies, oh, look at Flight Radar. This happened just at this exact time to the north.
Yeah.
And it's a really valuable tool. And if you're able to even um, have that data and have it converge with what your optics are doing, um, you will eliminate so many prosaic targets. It's a really good combo to have. Um, Not to mention having your own like passive radar setup. That's complicated, but it's something I think is once you can get the data in a form that's digestible. The hardware is not super complicated. Um, but yeah, radar is a really good way to triangulate on objects, as well as radio spectrometry or spectrography will help you pick up certain signals, like what a drone emits. Like if a drone is emitting 2.4 gigahertz or something, and you have on your optics something that you can't quite tell what it is, if that spikes, there's a valuable data point. You might be dealing with a drone, and that's something we've had at our development site multiple times. We've had a drone just pop over and hover. Um, Not sure who's doing it, but it's it's kind of helpful for our data in a way. It gives us a bucket to fill and to understand. So, um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
we've got a few of those in the UK at the moment over some of our bases.
I've heard. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've heard about that.
yeah,
That was a fun thing to monitor over the weekend,
yeah,
but
absolutely.
very strange indeed.
Yeah.
And if you get into setting up multiple cameras, obviously your lens choice is going to impact that field of view and that coverage you have. But something you also want to consider is barrel distortion, or any kind of distortion you have in your frame. I remember early on the project where we're setting up our multiple infrared cameras, and we're like, oh, we'll just have our frames and we'll stitch them together, and then we'll have this beautiful full sky view. It doesn't work like that. If you put those two frames together, let's say you have a tree right at the edge of both frames, that tree is going to look all strange. And that's an important part of calibration as well, where you can factor in that distortion. And then if you have an object moving across your frame, then that'll normalize what that object's doing. So something to keep in mind if you're wanting to go crazy with a bunch of cameras. The stitching process, or how you go about processing that data, is super complicated. So be ready for that. And then you might hear, like in the Galileo Project's papers, or just in any observations in a single camera, the discussion of angular kinematics. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying about, if you have an object moving across your frame, all you can really say is it moved this many degrees in my frame. I can't say it moved a mile or it moved 500 feet. I don't know until I know where that object is in space. And so really all you can claim with that single optic is, it moved 45 degrees um, in this amount of time, until you can corroborate that with other sensors. And that's something that uh, gets really tricky with objects that are flying towards you or away from you. We see it with aircraft all the time, just a light hovering. Um, and it's something, I live in the Denver, Colorado area. I've had a lot of people send me pictures of quote unquote UFOs over Denver. And every time, I would say about every time, I know that they are planes coming into land at Denver International. And it still catches me to this day. If I'm driving out east of Denver, um, it's eerie, just the amount of lights just hovering. And they don't look like they're moving. It's, a whole train of airliners coming in with their landing lights on. And it'll always catch me off guard. And I'm sure it catches a lot of people. And that's what a lot of sightings end up being. But like with the drone situation in the UK and other places, it's it's easy for a lot of skeptical people to go straight to that, but it's there are a lot of factors you got to use to factor that in or factor that out. And but yeah, that's an easy go-to for a lot of situations.
Yeah.
And so kind of visualizing triangulation, like I said, when you have that object in frame, you really just you have no way of telling where it's at in space, and because of that, you really don't know what size. Um, and so, kind of in this visual, you'll see that adding that second observation point or that sensor at a certain distance away, then you're able to, you know, take that information from multiple vectors and understand, where that object is. And from that, you can glean size. So um, to do that, you need at least two sensors set up in two locations. Ideally, if you have three, then that's fantastic. It makes doing the math a lot easier to have three set up, and the more the better. Um, why that also matters is not just for objects off in the distance that are confusing or hard to identify, but and this is something we've experienced a lot. It's something I've seen in a lot of videos. Insects or dust right by the camera lens. Um, if you obviously have a triangulation setup, then you see it in one camera, you don't see it in the other. That could be indicative of insects, even birds close by. Will help you understand what's going on there. And that's especially helpful in infrared where the fidelity is not quite as good. And infrared will pick up so many bugs and leaves. We have thousands upon thousands of detections of leaves falling because it trips our AI. So it's just something to look out for. And um, on this next slide, you kind of see an example of someone's, I think that's a near infrared camera
Yeah.
picking up rain or dust or something like that. Um, and not only does it cloud your data for anything else that may be going on, but um, obviously it's a bunch of false detections. So not saying there's any way to necessarily avoid it, but something to really keep in mind and have yourself prepared to um, maybe get that benefit of having another sensor nearby is to rule out some of those objects that fly across your frame. Um, once you have an idea of the optics you want to use, um, whether that's multiple GoPros or I can kind of pull up here and use this for an example. So this is just something I'm setting up for a site survey. So got a GoPro on one end. I have one of these Ricoh Theta 360 cameras set up as well. So you're getting a huge field of view, narrow field of view, high fidelity. And then on this end, let me grab something else here. So this is an enclosure that's going to hold a FLIR infrared camera. So this is kind of the business end. And uh, whereas those other two cameras are, that GoPro is probably $100 now. A Ricoh Theta is a couple $100. Where it gets difficult is this IR camera is like 6,000. So
Wow.
really difficult to have your own infrared setup, but there are ways. I would definitely recommend near infrared of anything. That could kind of open up some options. But once you have those picked out, and I ran into this, issue or hurdle today where I'm like, okay, I have these hooked up to a USB hub. That's going to somewhere with storage, right? I obviously have storage on board on the cameras or micro SD, something like that. But I hit record. I got what 20 minutes on one of these to record something, right? You want to get to a point eventually where you hit go and that thing's running all night and you can, review it quickly. So data storage, how that data is processed and whatever pathway you want to use, that's honestly more complicated than any of this like sensor selection or any of that. Um, and it's not my area of expertise, so I can't speak to it well, but um, yeah, having some sort of controller, some sort of user interface. A lot of these cameras, like GoPro, have uh, mobile apps. That helps a lot. That'll take care of like, half the battle. And that could just upload straight to GoPro's cloud, depending on, if you have those services. But if you really want to get this like centralized database of all your recordings going into one solution and processed somehow in one space, uh, you got to have some software expertise, and it's something to think about because you're going to be dealing with multiple terabytes. Um, we easily go through multiple terabytes every day in our data. So yeah, don't overdo it with your cameras. You might benefit more from um, lower fidelity data, but having a ton of it to go through than hitting a brick wall after 20 minutes and just being out of storage space. So something to keep in mind. The other big one for us is weatherization. Obviously, if you're setting something up at home, you probably have a little more flexibility. Put it by the window, set it just outside. So if a storm comes in, you can bring it back in, or something like a GoPro can go through a lot of extremes. I know the one I used it a lot for auto racing. If it got too hot, you're done. So maybe not sitting it out in the sun constantly, but yeah, whatever you end up setting up, think about sun exposure is probably the number one I've had to battle. Your mind instantly goes to like rain and snow and things like that. The sun um, will just kill a lot of things. A lot of computer overheating issues. You got to implement thermostat, fan, all this kind of stuff. So try to keep things simple, and that aspect of things will reward you down the road. And you can see in this picture, um, that's the dome over our mini Dalek, which has this is the visible mini Dalek, so visible cameras, and it has that protective window. But you'll see all over the dome, it sort of looks like someone's skinned the thing. That's just UV exposure, has peeled all that off, and then when our shade goes to wipe the window clean, it's actually smearing melted weatherization from the dome. It's actually smearing it across our window. So um, yeah, that's frustrating when you're being constantly defeated by the sun or just weather in general.
You're having to constantly problem solve, aren't you? You can tell.
It's constant, and a
Yeah.
lot of it comes down to things that are the most simple uh, things you would never think of. It's yeah, you want to feel like you're out there like MacGyver solving all sorts of cool technical things, but most of the time, honestly, it's like it rained too much, so I'm stuck for a day, or it's
Yeah.
I've shoveled more snow in the last year, and it just all of this, the more complex you make it, the more you're going to be doing things like shoveling snow and weatherizing a camper, and yeah, it gets pretty wild. So um, kind of jumping into or diving into a little more detail on some of the missteps that commonly occur. Like if you got a bunch of video gathered on your home unit and you're ready to go through it, it's good to go into that analysis, understanding some of the easy missteps and things that come from what a lot of people share, especially online. So some of the common themes, and I'm sure everyone's heard of these, parallax. Um, if you're moving in a car and something far off in the distance, a plane flying by you, and there's trees in between you and that plane, can do some weird things. It'll look like the plane's just hovering in the sky. Um, yeah, if you're in a moving reference point, makes it a whole lot more complicated. If you can keep your camera setup just completely fixed, all the better. Um, Reflections, that's I swear lens flare might make up for the most of misidentified objects. Um, Try to, if you're seeing some light in your frame, find the center point of your frame and see what's across that center point. Is it a street lamp? If it perfectly aligns across the center of your frame, there's a good indication you're dealing with a street lamp, a headlight, even reflections inside, within a window, or yeah, the lens flare is a really common one and one to look out for. Um, like I mentioned earlier, flight radar is such a good way to um, rule out the prosaic in most cases. Yeah, there are cases of planes not transponding. Um, Most of the time, that's going to be military or something questionable that doesn't want to be seen. Um, but yeah, it's such a good a cross-referencing tool for you. So um, digital versus optical, zoom, and focus. Wow, this if you see something really cool, like this is really common even with your iPhone. If you see something really cool, know the limits of the camera you're using. Like on an iPhone, if you zoom in all the way on it, you're digitally zooming and all you're doing is pulling those pixels into giant pixels and you're not resolving that object and could be creating kind of more artifacts. So yeah, find the more optical zoom you have, the better, and understand kind of where that optical crosses into digital if you have both. So um, yeah, very, very good to get what you can before post process. Uh, just a couple visuals in the next slide of, the Bronco on the left is a prime example of lens flare, where you look at the headlights, you find the middle of that frame. Sure enough, there's a very strange object up in the sky, and that's uh, a really good example of lens flare right there. And then, yeah, for parallax, if you're, thanks to AI, it's so hard to find a still that represents parallax. So thank you, Chat GPT. Um, if you're driving fast down the road, you got a plane following you. Obviously, it's going to look like that plane is not moving at all. So really understand, am I moving? Is that object moving? What's in between me and that object? And you can create a lot of different parallax effects that way. The same with holding your thumb out in front of you and closing one eye and then closing the other. It's uh, it's amazing what that effect can cause and confuse. So, shall we jump into the some of the
Yeah,
Q&A?
yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Cool.
Yeah, so I just so people know, I put something out on Instagram a little while ago, just saying that obviously I was going to be talking to Ezra and any questions that you might have for him, and I'll shoot them over to Ezra, and hopefully we'll get some of those answered. So thank you for answering them or for putting them up, Ezra, and I think people really appreciate it and find value. So the first one that we've got, what have we got? It's, I'm not gonna try and pronounce the names of some of these. They're just letters and numbers, aren't they?
They
Sometimes.
are. Yeah.
So it's probably for the best not to. All right, let's go with number one then. Why have the Galileo Project findings not been publicized or gained traction for Gen Pop Viz? Gen Pop Viz?
I may have shortened this one, but
Ah,
visibility, I think is,
okay.
yeah. Um, that's a good question and probably the most common question I get. And I understand the frustration with wondering what is the Galileo project up to? What have they found? Um, it really boils down to the ability to get through all of the data we've captured. We have not gone through all of it for this several month time frame that's being in our paper that's in peer review right now. There's a lot more data, and uh, we have to, have AI, machine learning go through it, filter it down, put it into categories of what it thinks it might be. There are scientists reviewing these data points. I think one volunteer on our team, I think, went through 40,000 objects and labeled them. And
40,000.
40,000, and that's just a partial set. That's just a small test set. So there's that effect, right? There's the more samples you have before you make that, some sort of claim or conclusion, obviously the better. Um, the other challenge is getting it through the scientific publication peer review process. If you jump the gun and make some sort of claim you haven't fully analyzed or vetted, then it it can really ruin everything that you end up publishing. So you have to go through the entire process. And I know kind of our first major run of analysis is in the peer review process now. It's actually that paper is publicly available if anyone wants to check it out. It's on archive. Um, so yeah, that's something I can shoot a link over to you, Jimmy, and if people want to check it out. But
Yeah, awesome. I'll whack it in the
yeah,
description. Thanks.
yeah. So yeah, more papers coming over the next few months, and that should help give people some visibility. But unfortunately, if one of our cameras sees something really wild, you know, a few nights ago, if I were to take that and put that on Twitter or Instagram page or whatever, um, that can really put our full data set at risk and there's really not much we can do with that information ourselves until we then pull and analyze, what did the acoustic data look like? What does the Spectre data, that it's a lot of work and it takes months to go through all of
Yeah,
these
yeah.
hundreds of terabytes.
And I guess there's also that issue of credibility. I mean, you're working on it from such a scientific perspective. If you get something and it looks incredible, you shoot it out there, everyone look at this, and then it turns out to be something that's prosaic or easily explainable later on, and then you kind of got egg on your face. And it's like, oh, they pump out that sort of nonsense, that fake stuff. We don't have to listen to them. So I guess it is really important that this is, when if hopefully if you come out with something, it's solid and there's no one's going to be able to go, no, that's just parallax or that's just lens flare.
Right.
Yeah, I
And yeah,
understand.
I completely understand that frustration coming from the public. I mean, it's frustrating for me. Um, but yeah, like you said, it's that risk. You can't have one slip up really, ruin everything that you're doing, and it just has to be solid. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so the next question I think was what cameras are used and what focal length on lenses.
Right.
So
So yeah, we've used a bunch of different cameras. I would say, our common go-to, the FLIR boson. You'll find that in a lot of high-tech systems, security systems using infrared cameras. So FLIR boson's the go-to. They have a boson plus now. Uh, that's actually the one I'm mounting up here. I'm going to test it for the first time. Um, they're expensive, but yeah, there's not a ton of options out there for infrared. So we use the boson 640, and for lenses, we generally target the like 50-degree field of view and the 95-degree field of view, whether we're doing an all sky setup, like the 95 might be at zenith to get that vertical shot. And then 50 degrees is what we settled on for kind of your horizon view. Um, so that's kind of in the infrared. For visible, our latest ones for all sky we've tried are the Alvium makes, I think the model's Alvium 1800 series. I think the specific one is like a C1242 is the one we're using. Um, really good, visible camera and color, really high fidelity, one worth checking out. I think you can get, um, they have a bunch of different kind of submodels, but I think you can get a hold of some of those for just, a couple $100, depending on the shutter type. But one of the cool cameras we started with for visible all sky is the Alcor OMEA 9C. It's something like, what is it, like 37 megapixel. Uh, that was really cool to use when a lot of those aurora borealis like effects came down south a lot further. We got some really cool images of that, but it's that one's a bear for processing. I think we've gotten it up to like 3 frames a second at some point, but it's throwing so much data or pulling so much data through. It's a cool piece of technology. I don't know that we have the setup to really use it at its full potential, and it's like, I don't know, 13 grand. So maybe skip that one. But if you want to see a cool camera, look that one up. Um, and then for pan tilt zoom, this one's also kind of a monster, but we use the SEW Beacon 8.0. It's like the size of my torso and pan tilt zoom, 40x optical. It is really cool, but it's another one of those where we're really still kind of building the back end behind it to make full use of it. So there are a ton of PTZ options out there, even on Amazon. A lot of the security cameras that are solar powered, you hang up outside your door. There are some affordable PTZ versions of that you can get, whether you just control it from your phone or whatever. I can't make any recommendations on those specific ones, but yeah, worth looking into. I would start with fixed, anything
Yeah,
to start with.
yeah. And I think there's probably price points for from one end of the spectrum to the other, isn't there? From people that I've spoken to, because I've had people speak direct DM me and ask me, budgets. Don't worry about budget. What's the best thing that I can get? But I don't know. I'll ask some questions. But then other people at the other end of the spectrum, like, what can I use? I think that comes on to the next question actually, which is how can I use my iPhone, or what adaptation can I put onto my iPhone to get better imagery? I think this question is there a night vision adapter lens that will attach to an iPhone? And what's the best cheap camera for night vision record?
Right. Yeah. I'm not aware of a whole lot you can do with your iPhone that's going to probably give most people what they have in mind for, like proper night vision that doesn't have a bunch of artifacts or effects. I've played around with some adapters here and there. In fact, I have I wish I had it on me, but an infrared camera that plugs into my phone. It's a separate camera, it's a separate unit. That's probably what you want to go for if you want to play around with something. If you're starting to try and change what your iPhone camera is kind of doing, um, I know one adapter I've played around with is an all sky adapter. So it's this little fisheye you clip onto the camera itself. All kinds of trouble with it. You bump it slightly, half your frame is gone. It's so I wouldn't recommend a whole lot into that unless you really understand the iPhone camera itself and using certain filters, something like that. But yeah, I would use a separate camera. One that's come up a lot on the UAP topic. I know a lot of people use it. People that see a lot of objects themselves that have gone through different cameras to get the best out of it. Something like the Psionics Aurora Pro, it's a few $100s, but a really good quality camera in the visible and the near infrared, with night vision that'll help you. So um, be careful when looking at the plug-in type stuff that plugs into your phone or whatever. I would go as standalone as you can, but I get it. It's hard with a budget to get some of these, like the night vision monocular, the PVS was at 14. I've wanted one of those so bad, but yeah, I don't have 5 grand to drop on, a single thing to look through. So yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you ask Mr. Bledsoe? So this will be Chris Bledsoe. Would he be so kind as to sit next to the sensors? So yeah, Chris Bledsoe. For those listening that don't know Chris, he's sort of fairly famous in the UFO UAP world. He tends to go outside, go in his garden, and just captures orbs, essentially lights in the sky on camera on a very regular basis. And there's a lot of history around him, some connections with NASA and some other bits and pieces in the past. Interesting guy. So I guess the idea is he would be there to be some kind of summoning force, and then you can have your cameras and sensors nearby. Why don't you do that? Invite Chris.
That's the question really stuck out. It's a really good question, and it's it's something that um, it triggers a lot of thought with like, okay, how do you pull that into the current sort of dry scientific process? Um, I'll go as far as to say, like, I know Chris, I'm familiar with him. We've spoken about this, um, and it's something we're looking at incorporating into. We have the instrumentation. I know that's something that he wishes he had, better instruments for what he is seeing. So it makes perfect sense to see if there's a valid way to pull the two together. And part of that involves, not tipping off your own team to bias your experiment of some sort or bias your data. So it's a tricky problem to solve, but that's definitely something we're looking into.
Excellent. That would be amazing. That would be fantastic. Okay, what's your favorite UAP case?
Yeah, this one, it's a good question. I think, and you're probably like me, where you've digested so many
Yeah.
UAP cases that there's probably, if I stared at this question for an hour, I would keep changing my answer probably a lot. So I think what comes to mind for me with like having a lot of solidity to different perspectives, different things observed, the veracity of the claims, Rendlesham is really high up there for me, as well as the Varginha case, which uh, still doesn't have a lot of exposure. A lot of people don't know about that one. Um, I know James Fox brought that more to light, and I think it's one more people should look at. It does have a lot of kind of anecdotal eyewitness accounts, but the amount of just things that allegedly happened, it's wild, and I think that's one that over time, as sort of the disclosure process happens, I think we're going to get more information on. It seems that we already kind of do every few months. But that one I really like because of just the spectrum of what allegedly happened. You have a craft on fire, allegedly, crashing. I think there were accounts of like another craft. I can't recall, but you have beings, you have citizens interacting with alleged beings, military involved, medical professionals involved. It's, yeah, the whole thing. So
Yeah.
who knows what happened, but I think there's a lot to unpack with that one. Um, I kind of keep in my little bucket on the side some of my cases that I've read about or that I really like, but I just don't know what to do with, and I wish there was more to them. And this one's not all that popular, but you're probably familiar with the Walking with the Tall Whites, Charles Hall in I think Air Force Base or Army Base in Nevada. He's got, I think, at least three books on this. I went through them, really enjoyed it. It's a hard read, but it's one of those big if true cases, right? There's not a whole lot we can do to corroborate this unless people around Charles Hall come forward about it, at that time. But um, you can go down a deep rabbit hole with some of these favorites that you just don't know what to do with, all the way to like Dolores Cannon books.
Mm.
Like, who knows
Yeah.
that might be one of the biggest big if truths. I just don't know what to do with that, right? So I still enjoy reading up on these cases, knowing about them. Um, but yeah, there's you can only do so much with some of those that kind of leave you open-ended.
Yeah, there are so many on there. There's so, and you forget because there's so many, you forget you go into the next one and the next one, and then you focus on other things, and you totally forget about that thing. And then somebody mentions it, you're like, oh yeah, that case, that's an incredible case. I think it's that's one of the things that I worry about is as the new generations come in and people start to move into the subject, they sort of forget about a lot of that history because it's not televised, because we've not got, HD interviews with people in color, and on Instagram to scroll. That those
Right.
cases are sort of a bit boring because they're fuzzy screen stuff from back in the day, or they're written and declassified documents, CIA stuff, whatever it is. It's not as easy to digest as David Grush at Congress or Louis Elizondo at Congress, which is much easier to understand and digest and bring it on. And it's a shame. As part of what I'm trying to do is slowly bring bits and bobs back in little bite-sized pieces. But some amazing cases, amazing
It
cases.
is, yeah. A lot of folks like that are kind of just getting into this topic. They hear every time this topic's brought up, they hear about the tic tac and go
Mm,
fast, gimbal, all those sorts of things. And, like you said, some of the older cases that aren't as fun or easy to digest. I mean, you could get into like cryptids and like some of the weird stuff from the 50s to the 70s. Um, it's so wild and how a lot of these accounts, and you can find a lot of it in Jacques Vallée's work as well, of how some of these things appear according to the time of like,
yeah.
a lot of reference to airships or these sort of steampunk type like beings or
Mm,
really like a robot a child would draw, like just
yeah.
a metal box that walks around. There's a lot of strange directions to go with this topic. And it would be so great to get to a point where we can expand on those cases as well instead of the some of the monotonous like military focused stuff of
Yeah.
Tic Tac's awesome. And it's a very valuable case, but yeah, you can go down some crazy rabbit holes with this topic.
Yeah. I think the other issue with the military stuff is that there's only so much that they're ever going to give us, even if stuff's declassified and there's new government administration come in and promise us the world, and we might get little snippets. But when you've got some of these cases that aren't so much military cases and they're just people that have had experiences, and some of those are the most interesting to me because no one's held back by classification or by clearances and waiting for stuff to be declassified in 70 years time. um, but I guess the other side of that is that the there's that credibility that comes with something official. So you've got that balance, I suppose, between the two. um,
Right. Yeah,
yeah.
just to imagine putting iPhones in the hands of some of the people in these cases from 50s, 60s, 70s. Just what wild things you might see and hopefully, a lot of people that are interested in setting up their own equipment. Like this is sort of the next step into that. I mean, we've seen the frustration with what people are doing with their phones and the limits that they reach with that. It's we have the tech available at the right prices to kind of expand on that now, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so what proof would you refer to when arguing for the existence of ETs?
Well, I'd be stepping on a scientific mine if I said there was proof. I mean, there might be proof. I don't have it, is I guess my point. I imagine someone has it, but like most people, I don't know. I can't point to any proof, but I think the primary thing that keeps me going on this subject and, has me confident that I'm not going down a dead end is the whole like where there's smoke, there's fire. Like there's so much smoke on this topic. It's almost ridiculous. Like when and we still hear this in the public where someone says, "Well, there's no evidence of this yet," and it just drives me nuts because it's a matter of what effort people want to put into understanding what's out there. Um, yeah, we don't have the UFO landing on the White House lawn, and I'm not sure that would matter. Um, we don't have the announcement from the president that ETs exist. I don't know that you're going to change the skeptical crowd. You
Yeah.
just have to be interested enough to read through enough of the information that's out there. And there's a lot of bad information, but there's a lot of good information. There's a lot of really compelling info. And as some of that compelling info, you connect the dots between that and other unrelated compelling info, the smoke just builds and builds and builds. And that's, you know, that's what's motivating me now, and I think motivates a lot of people on this topic. But yeah, totally frustrated. I don't have proof that I have access to, and that's
Yeah.
also another driving factor for people is
Yeah.
getting to that.
Yeah. Yeah, Ezra, you're like the real life Fox Mulder. You're like out there actually doing it on a daily basis, searching for. I mean, we are in some respects, and I don't mean this in a overly romantic or poetic way or whatever, but you're doing it on our behalf because we haven't got, as we've been talking about now, we've got the iPhone and there's a probably a small selection of people that can go out and buy that kit, but then to also have the knowledge and all the stuff that you've just talked about, which is a minefield, to be able to put it together and capture good data. So really, the majority of us are relying on you and your team, and there are a few other people that are doing a similar thing, but there's not many out there. That I don't know anyone that's doing what you guys are doing, and so yeah, the our our evolution, it's on your shoulders, mate.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And like the we're at a point now where there's so much interest behind, like what we're doing. There's a lot of people doing similar things. Um, it's, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing without the most intelligent people I've ever met supporting me. I'm more of like the wrench out in the field. Like there are some really brilliant people that are answering a lot of the questions I have and I run into and have issues out in the field. And there's a lot of volunteer interest and support. But where we're at as a project right now is we have a ton of data and it's just exponentially growing and coming in as we set up 2 more sites here in the next few months. And we need scientists. We need scientists that we can hire. And unfortunately, you know, Galileo Project right now is on a budget where we can support the instrumentation, the purchase of instrumentation out in the field that we have, and some of the full-time members like myself on the project. But yeah, we really need to get to a point where we get more scientists supported to sift through that, analyze that data, because that's growing like a balloon as to where resources need to go. We've created the Galileo Project Foundation. So we're at a point now where um, you know anyone, if they want to throw $5 at what we're doing to support hiring data scientists, they can do that. I know prior to this, you kind of had to go to the Galileo Project website, go through kind of Harvard's process of donation. It's a little bit, hard through an academic institution to sort of figure all that out. But it's, through the foundation, we're getting to a point where it's sort of kind of like a crowdfunding model. It's, something people can easily access. And, if you can throw a few bucks toward the cause, then it goes a long way. And with so many people interested in this, if we're able to get like 2 or 3 data scientists hired in the next year, then some of those questions about, why are you guys holding on to information? What's this bombshell you might have in your data? To go to what you asked earlier, I don't know what we have. There's a lot of data to still dust off and look at, and we don't know what's in there yet. We can throw all our computers at it and people to manually review, but we gotta have people that are making these tools more efficient, more accurate, and effective. The detection models sift out what's interesting, what isn't. Those models are always training and learning, and takes some of the most brilliant minds to even figure out the cycles to put those AI algorithms through. Like I'm an idiot when I look at that stuff. So yeah, that's where we need our help right now. Just more effectiveness, more efficiency, and what to do with our data. And then hopefully we'll have quicker turnaround on what we publish and what goes out to the public.
Awesome. Awesome. Ezra, man, it's been such a pleasure. We need to talk more frequently than than
We should.
yeah, man. Yeah, definitely. I really, really enjoyed that, and it's been so useful. I think it'll be really, really useful to people. Really useful. So thank you so much. Really, really appreciate that, man.
Thank you. Hopefully
Really
I didn't put
appreciate it.
anyone to sleep, but
No,
yeah,
no, no. I mean, this is probably one of the most asked questions. Like, what can I do? How can I improve? And I get the question every week. Sometimes, multiple times a day. Even, I'll open my DMs and it'll be multiple questions like that, and I'm like, I don't know, but I know somebody that does. So awesome, man. Really, really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure.
yeah,
Let's
I'd love to talk more and nerd out on cases or whatever in the future. So
yeah, definitely,
yeah, it's always good
definitely.
good talking with you.
Awesome, man. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you. It's good
Take
talking
care
with
of
you.
yourself. Yeah, good talking to
All
you
right.
too. Speak soon,
You
man.
too.
Bye now.
All right, bye-bye.